Hello everyone. In this video we're going to be looking at something a little bit different. We're going to be looking at Geography Coursework. Now specifically I'm going to be looking at the CIE based coursework, but when it comes to Geography Coursework most of them are about the same. This could apply to Edexcel coursework and IB coursework. The marking criteria, the percentages and the word count however change. For example, if you're looking at IB coursework, you can follow this plan, but you have to remember that it's 2,500 words for the internal assessment, rather than 2,000 words that it is for the CIE coursework. In addition to that, the IB coursework has a different percentage, depending if you're doing higher level or standard level. Please don't presume that everything that I say, or all the specifics that I mention, are with regard to the CIE coursework. The outline though, and the expectations with regard to how you write coursework, they will remain the same. Now, if you're looking at the screen over here, you'll be able to see that we are looking at the CIE assessment criteria. If you're a student studying CIE, you're likely to be doing two of these different forms of assessment, compulsory, and then, depending on what your school chooses, you could do component 3 or paper 4. We're going to be talking today about the component 3 part. This is the coursework. And for CIE, this accounts for 27.5% of your total mark. Totally, as you can see from the slide, it is 60 marks, divided up into different areas, each marked out of 12, and it is a 2,000 word assignment. It is a center-based assignment, and any teacher who's teaching this needs to ensure that they've got the Cambridge approval before undertaking this piece of coursework. I'm going to be changing the slide now, and I'm going to be going on to a document. This document over here. This is a document specifically that I've written for my students. I'll provide a link in the description below where you can go access it and you can download it if you want to also use it. This document is designed as a student guide. In other words, it's designed for students to be able to use it, to be able to get the best possible marks that they can in the coursework. From my years of experience of teaching, basically when a teacher is following this and they're telling you something specific, you should follow their advice. The way that the coursework works is that a teacher will assign a topic, they will then set the project going, the students will collect the data, and then this data will be used in the coursework. Now, any advice that's given by the teacher should be followed because it's the teacher who marks the coursework and who has a say on the mark scheme. Then they submit a few of the pieces of work to moderators who check to see that the marking is accurate, and invariably they tend to agree with the teachers. So, I need to reiterate, please, if you're a student doing your coursework, make sure you listen to your teachers because their advice is based on how they are likely to mark your coursework. I'm going to scroll down now and show you all of the coursework marking criteria. This is what's called the route to inquiry, and you can see it's divided up into 7 parts. Identification of the issues, questions and problem, formulation of design of work, collection of data, selection and collation of data, representations and recordings of results, analysis and interpretation, making effective conclusions, suggesting solutions, and evaluation. Your coursework basically has to contain all of these different areas. I wouldn't focus too much on this because the further parts are going to go through it in more detail, and they're going to break it down into a more step-by-step process. Alright. Important point. As per most criteria with coursework, plagiarism plays a very, very important role. It is extremely important that you don't plagiarize. Now, plagiarism, as you can see from this slide, is showing you, this is showing you the types of things that could be construed as plagiarism. Basically, it's taking somebody else's work or ideas and trying to represent it as your own. Now, it could be taking ideas from the internet, from a book. It could be even taking photos, another student's work, an old student's work, or even paying somebody else other than you to do this work. It's essential you don't do it. But it's also important to understand that you're not in competition with each other when you're writing this coursework. You can help each other. When you're collecting the data, CIE and the IB board, they allow you to use each other's data, raw data that is. So if you go as a group and each of you collect data at different parts and then you share that data, that's 100% allowed. It is only after that data is being collected that you should have no interaction with following students. You should never model your work or even show your work to another student. You can help them out. You can go onto their computer and you can show them how to make a graph, or you can point them in the right direction or give them ideas. But it's important that you never really show them your work. You don't want to have any similarities. And unfortunately, the way that the system works is that even if the other person copied your work, you will probably be held accountable for that as well, because it's very, very hard to tell, unless the other person admits it, whether or not it was all your work or their work. So it's better to be safe than sorry. Do your own work, help other people, but never show your work to any other person taking the coursework part of the examination. Right? Funny little cartoon. Okay, this is showing you the assessment for coursework. Now, the assessment criteria above, this is printed, this section over here is printed directly from the CIE curriculum. It's broken down into 60 marks, 12 marks for each section, worth 20% each. Now, I've taken that and I've turned it into a slightly more usable grid. The first part that you have to do is knowledge with understanding. Now, all of these parts need to be shown throughout your work, but they basically break down to parts of your coursework. The knowledge and understanding part is mainly represented in your introduction, which should be around about the 300 word mark out of the total 2000. And to be able to achieve the 9 to 12 marks, you need to provide comprehensive information that, carefully looks at geographical terms, the aims are clearly shown, things like that. The skills and analysis is mainly the methodology part. This is about 300 words. Organization and presentation, this is shown throughout your coursework, and it looks at how professional your work is. Is it laid out properly? Have you shown correct graphs and calculations? That type of thing. There's no word count attributed to this because most captions and most annotations aren't counted in this part, or aren't counted as part of the 2000 word limit. The analysis is always the largest single part of your coursework. So you should spend about 2,000 words out of your 1,000 words out of your 2,000 words on this part, about half of it. Conclusion and evaluation, these should be about 200 each. In the following part, this part over here, these are some advice that you can look at when you download the coursework. This part here is the part that you should properly follow and make sure that you can tick off each of these areas if you want to get a good mark. So I've broken it down and given advice of what to include in each section, and there is also a little tick section here that you can use to show that you've completed it. An ideal geography introduction should do a few things. Firstly, it should always show your research question, what it is you're looking at. Refer to it in your introduction. You should then link your research question to the appropriate unit of your study. Be that tourism, the coast, whatever. Make that link explicit. Following on, you need to talk about an introduction to the area. Well, where is it you are doing the study? What's the size of the city or the coast? Maybe a brief history. What's happening in that area? You should also describe the location. Now it's important that you describe the location using maps. And these maps need to be maps, not satellite images. They should also show a title, a scale, have a compass direction, all of the criteria that a correct and detailed map should have. Then, you need to explain, well, why is it important to research this question? Link it back to some reason. Why do we care about this piece of coursework? Typically speaking, most people suggest that you look at 3 hypotheses. The reason there's no criteria that have been set out this by any of the examination bodies, but 3 is a good number so you don't end up looking at too few criteria and also not too many because you don't want it to impact on your word count. This is a realistic suggestion. And when you have formulated your hypothesis in the introduction, it's very important to explain why you think these are going to be true. You can't have a theory without knowing why, or theoretically why, you believe this. It doesn't make logical sense to do that. The second part of your coursework is your methodology. This is how you conducted your data. Locate the areas specifically where you collected the data on a different map. Did you collect data at this part, mark it A, or at another part, mark it B? You should also talk about the equipment that you used. Name it correctly. If you've used specialist equipment, for example, you've used a clinometer on a coast, or you've used, an air quality meter for an urban area, or decibelometer, you should mention this. What sampling method did you use? This is an important part. Did you collect your data randomly? Did you do it systematically every 100 meters? It's important that you mention this because that could be then discussed later in your evaluation. Sometimes it's quite important to show your data collection sheets. This is a good place to put them is in your appendix at the end. Typically speaking, you don't get marks for your appendix, but it's always a good place where the the moderator and your teacher can go and look up things to see how it fits into the grand scheme, the big picture of your coursework. Then you need to explain how you specifically collected the information. Taking photos during the collection phase is quite important. It shows gathering techniques. You can use these to indicate or to annotate your various methods. And then it's also quite important to briefly explain why the method that you did is important, how it helps you prove your hypothesis. Why did you do that test? Why not do something else, or why did you specifically choose that one? The following phase over here, this is the part that you need to do throughout the whole piece of work, but it's also quite important. It's the organization and the presentation of your data. Make sure all of your graphs, images, tables, they should all be labeled. Figure 1, Figure 2, Figure 3, Table 1, etc. Keep it consistent. When you use a photo or an image, it is not used to make your coursework pretty. It's used for a specific purpose. Therefore, you should label it, and you should also talk about it in the main body of your coursework. When you're discussing something, put in brackets, see Figure 1, or talk about that figure specifically in your piece of work. That brings your images together and it puts them in context. Also in this part, any information that you collect from the internet or from books, these must be referenced correctly. Now I suggest you use Harvard referencing system, simply put because that's one of the main ones that we use in geography. You could also use maybe Chicago or MLA. I personally prefer Harvard. That might be up to your teacher though. You also need to include in this section a wide variety of data presentation techniques. Don't just do bar graphs or line graphs. Pick the most appropriate method and try and pick a variety, maybe 4 or 5 different types. your teacher should be able to point you in the right direction, or at least suggest when one works and another one doesn't. Also, raw data sometimes has its use, but you get more marks for processing that data, turning it into averages or into percentages, wherever you think is most necessary. Okay, analysis. This is the part that I told you was the largest part, the 1,000-word section. The graphs and data that you have now created should be linked into sections of your analysis. It's good to divide your analysis into each different hypothesis. So if you've picked 3 hypotheses, create 3 main sections in your analysis. And always start with your hypothesis. This is the hypothesis. We expected this to be true. And then talk about whether or not the data shows your hypothesis to be true or not. That's what you're discussing. What were your expectations? And also, what does the evidence that you collected show? Describe it. Does it prove your hypothesis or disprove it? You should also, again, refer to your figures and your tables. You should look for any anomalies in your data. And if you find an anomaly, you should discuss why it's an anomaly and maybe even talk about some potential reasons or explanations for it. Try in your analysis to also use statistical techniques. Spearman's rank is an amazing test, and it shows that you truly understand how to use this data. And finally, refer back to your findings to the study question. Remember, you've got an overall question that you're trying to answer. So try and phrase it in a way that refers back to it. After you've completed your analysis, you move on to the conclusion. Getting marks in the conclusion is quite straightforward. What you need to make sure you do is you need to, again, address the hypothesis. Did you prove them? Did you disprove them? And briefly explain again why and what the evidence was for proving them or disproving them. It's extremely important in this part that you ensure that your that your conclusion is consistent. That you don't say something different in your conclusion to what you were talking about in your analysis. If you keep them consistent, invariably you'll get the marks. Finally, you move on to your evaluation. Your evaluation is talking about how strong your research project was. It's not a license to say everything that happened bad, or that was bad. You should say what you did that was reliable, what you did that was good. Then you need to discuss, obviously, what you did that was bad and how you could improve it, how you could extend your project. Were there any problems with the techniques or limitations? For example, you could say that one of your data collections was very strong, you got strong, good, reliable data, but you could also say that there was maybe a problem with the time of year that could have impacted it, or maybe you wanted to extend this project and look at it over a whole year period, and you would do that in the future, and you should say why that would make your data better. There could also be a problem with equipment. You might want to suggest better equipment that you can use. This is about just showing understanding that you know the limitations of your project. Coursework is overall, it's an amazing opportunity that all students have to get extremely good marks. All it requires is hard work, organization, and following your teacher's advice, maybe even using this guide as well. So get to work, make sure you're working hard, make sure you're organized, and I love this little image over here. You can make excuses or you can make it happen. That sums up what coursework is. It's worth 27.5%, and that means that you can score extremely highly on this piece of work. Your teachers can help you. They're not allowed to write anything for you, but they can give you almost infinite advice. They can make suggestions. They can tell you when you've done something wrong, and they can suggest how you can change it, but they will never do the work for you. That you need to do yourself. So just to conclude, good luck, work hard, follow the teacher's advice, maybe use this piece of this link that I'm going to provide for you to help you plan out your coursework, and I'm sure that it will be a very successful piece of work that will help you in your studies, be those GCSE and CIE, Edexcel, or even the international baccalaureate program. So thank you very much for watching. If you've liked this video, please click like. If you want to see more content, subscribe, and I try to load up new content once or twice a month, depending on my workload as a teacher. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a really great day.